Do is pick on a fully assembled DeWalt. The only thing that I've done to prep this one is take the table off, because to do this operation you don't need the table on it, plus it reduces the weight of the thing by some 20 pounds. So I'm going to cover what I referred to on the other saw about how you disassemble the thing, but first the reason why. He was reporting the thing was making noise. So when we fire the thing up and start this, it's considerably noisier than the other unit that we had apart. Based on my experience with the unit, what I strongly suspect is that this vertical rocker back here in the back is at fault. Probably the bearings back there. Okay, we're going to start taking this saw apart here, but before I do, let me make a reference to an exploded view diagram of what's inside one of these saws. This diagram is available from the DeWalt website, and on the video in the description field I will put a link in there as to how to get to that diagram. It's very useful for those who have never done this before. First thing I'm going to do here is start taking some of these bolts loose that I talked about on the other unit. These are all metric fasteners. Use a Torx bit to operate the heads on these bolts. Okay, and I would heartily recommend that you put all the hardware that you remove in a container, because there will be a lot of loose parts by the time this is done. And hopefully you'll be able to find them all when you get ready to put it back together. This saddle, because it goes completely over both covers, it needs to be removed to be able to get the case halves apart. Again, that goes in the parts bucket as well. Okay, for your information, I believe this is it's a T25 that you need to take those cover screws apart, and it's the same one to get these front screws out. Only the one side of these screws needs to come out. There's two more over here, but they will stay in place for this operation. Okay, now we're going to coax this cover off of here. It's going to start getting floppy once we get this cover loose here. So we'll now switch over to start taking the back cover off. That one requires a different Torx bit. This one's a size 28. Because I'm going to reuse that one, I'm going to leave it handy, because I need that to keep the arm on. Okay, now then I'm just taking a look around to make sure I've got everything loose. And usually the way I like to pry this thing apart, there's a little gap right up here. You can get a straight blade screwdriver in there to coax these two halves apart. And that noise you heard was some of the nuts coming out of the other side. I'll collect those and put them away. Okay, and that enables you to get this side cover completely off. And then while it's sitting there behaving well, let's put some of the hardware back together. Naturally, the nut that fell out was the one that I needed. Okay, that gets... Okay, we'll resume putting this integrity back in this machine here. What I referred to before about this machine getting a little wobbly when you get it this far apart, I'll show you why here in a second. As you can see, this thing tips over pretty easily. And if this side cover here comes off, it does this action here. So all I'm doing with this partial reassembly here is getting the structural integrity back into this thing so that it behaves as a unit rather than 3 separate parts or more. Okay, with that, it puts both halves of the machine back together again. One thing that I wanted to point out to you before we went any further, once you take the 2 case halves apart, there's a little wavy washer on the end of the shaft that's amazingly easy to lose. So take advantage of that forewarning and stow it. Okay, now we need to make sure and secure that part. Okay, now then we should have the structural integrity of this thing back together so we can run it with the covers off now. Okay, let me take the blade out of the blade clamp so we can move these parts independently. Some of these bushings are pretty loose in here. To show you what goes into one of these machines, I referred to on the other one the fact that you've got an eccentric shaft coming out of here through a bearing, go into this rocker shaft, where there's another bearing and sleeve inside here, more bearings and sleeves in there, a rather large sleeve and a pair of bearings inside here, and so on to the front of the machine. Now if Buzz will move the camera over to that stack of bearings, that is the full complement of bearings inside of one of these saws. Outside of the motor itself, that's the collection of bearings. There's only one of them that is a sealed bearing. The others are open frame needle bearings. And the top reason that I've seen for these saws to start exhibiting noise like these are doing is that when these bearings are put together, at the bearing factory, there's enough lubricant in there to keep the needles from falling out and to get it through the warranty period. If you run the saw flat out for, you know, eight plus hours a day for somewhere between 200 and 365 days a year, you're going to burn up whatever lubricant was put in those bearings real soon, you know, like shortly after the year is up of the warranty. So these things need lubrication, and until you take the covers off like what I've done here, you can't get to any of these bearings except maybe some of these ones in the front to lubricate them. Generally what I have found in these saws is the first bearing to fail is the one inside here, which necessitates that you got to take all of this stuff loose at one time, which is what I'm going to attempt to demonstrate right now.